Oh, hello there, outliers. Niiamah Shang here, and thank you so much for letting us be a part of your journey here today. We're here for an Outliers Edge roundtable. We brought together two incredible outliers who are going to share how they continue to show up as leaders and take their visionary ideas and bring them out into life on a consistent basis. All right. Today we have Jay Rudman and Terry Tucker. Jay, Terry, thank you so much for making the time for this. Thank you for also accumulating the experiences so that when we come together, we're going to have an incredible time. Thank you both.
Thank you for
Our
having me
pleasure.
on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
So what we're going to do in this conversation here is that we're going to get to know more about you and see how you navigate your ongoing journey for excellence and impact. To give us a chance to orient into that, would you mind sharing more about you and the game you're playing? Jay, we'll start with you. Let us know more about you and the game you're playing.
Sure. Nice to meet everyone. Jay Rudman. I'm CEO of SciStream. It's an organization that is in the technology space. We do 3D body scanning, and the use cases associated with that are in the apparel space and the health and wellness space. And we can get into the specifics of that if warranted in the conversation. But in terms of the game I'm playing, my game, as it has been throughout my entire career, is to find great people, bring them into the organization, direct them in terms of what we're trying to accomplish, and then get out of their way because they're amazing people and they really understand the mission and the values that we lead. And as I said, empower them to be successful. So that's the game I'm playing.
Oh, I love it, Jay. Thank you so much here. And Terry, how about you?
Sure. My name is Terry Tucker. The game I'm playing right now is the game of life. 14 years ago, I was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer and told I would be dead in 2 years. And I tried to figure out how to, take a death sentence and turn it into a life sentence. I've been through this journey. I've lost my foot. I've lost my leg. I've had all kinds of different treatments. But how do you then show up in the world and help people? And I've always said this journey through cancer has been about something that's bigger than me. I should have died many times along this journey, but I have a very strong faith in God. And I think that's really God now telling me to, hey, share this journey with people and see how you can make a difference in the world. So, Jay, you're scanning. That may be something you and I need to talk about after we finish this. So that may be something that helps me.
Absolutely. And glad you're here today, Terry. So,
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I feel that on multiple levels. I feel that on
yeah.
multiple levels. There's a you. What's coming to me right now, Terry, is when you talk about taking a death sentence and turning it into a life sentence, and I think that when I hear that, one, I get goosebumps, and then two, I think about the thinking that outliers have that's unconventional, that goes differently than what most other people would have, right? And it looks like you brought in like an unconventional thought. And so I'm going to ask both of you here, we'll start with you, Terry, like if you want to continue going down this path, but what's a viewpoint that you have that you would say like is an unconventional way of thinking about it, but it is actually the thing that either brings you the most joy, success, so on and so forth. That like I would love to hear about it. What's a viewpoint that you have that most other people wouldn't realize is actually like the key to it all for you? Terry, do you want to go on
It, it's really about relationships for me right now. 100 years from now, nobody's going to remember that I was here, and that's fine. But what I want now are those deep relationships. There's a professor at the University of Chicago, a psychology professor, who does this experiment with his students. They go out and they get on a bus, and in 3 questions, they go deep with somebody. So you just sit down next to somebody and say, hey, hi, hey, how you doing? Fine, how are you? And I'm just making this up. Second question, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a doctor. Third question, have you always wanted to be a doctor? It doesn't matter what they say. They could say, no, I grew up on a farm and I wanted to be a veterinarian, but X, Y, and Z happened. Or, my mom was a doctor and she died of breast cancer at 40, so I'm honoring her memory by being a doctor. Whatever they tell you, they're telling you their why, their purpose, their mission in life. And that's really kind of what interests me. One of the jobs I had in my life was I was a SWAT hostage negotiator with the Cincinnati Police Department, and we were taught to be curious. We were taught to ask those questions and go deep with people. And I just don't think social media, the internet, whatever, it doesn't allow us to go deep anymore. So that's really kind of where I am right now. And what really gets me going is going deep with other people.
It's awesome. Is it Professor Epley by chance, Terry?
I believe it is, yes.
Yeah, okay. So I'm a University of Chicago graduate myself from their MBA school. I've seen Nick Epley. Anyone watching this, definitely read his books. The takeaway from that is exactly what you said, Terry. And to build on it is that the individual asking the questions, walking in, thinks it's going to be very awkward. And when you ask them afterwards, they feel very comfortable. And when they asked the individual who was asked the questions, they would have thought it would have been awkward. And then afterwards, they thought it was a delightful conversation. So, no matter where you are, have those conversations.
It's something that's really interesting to me because um, the construct of this conversation right here is like, I bring together people who are strangers oftentimes, and
Hmm.
we end up having a conversation, and they're like, I didn't know where this was going to go. I felt risky to even say yes to come in, and it ended up being something really meaningful, and I love to play with that with these components of like both the unknown, but also like allowing ourselves to get into the depth of it all. Jay, I want to move on. I want to go ask another question, but I also find myself deeply curious right now about like some of the unconventional thoughts that you have and the ways that you bring it out to like build to make your impact out in the world. Do you mind sharing like an unconventional view you have?
Yeah, so I am the serial entrepreneur. I've had a number of different business successes, and I share that not out of any hubris or humble brag or anything like that, more about that the unconventional thinking I have as a serial entrepreneur is it's about me, as I already shared, empowering others to be successful and the relationships, picking up that word that Terry put down, the relationships I have with my team, because oftentimes people think the founder, the CEO is the one that takes that hill first and everyone is a follower to that. But what I have found as an unconventional thinker is that as a CEO, you often have to be a follower yourself. You have to really empower others to lead. Certainly, you have to ensure that everyone knows what the vision is and what the North Star is, or whatever language you use within your organization. But then you basically, as I already indicated, get out of the way and you become a very strong advocate and follower to those leaders that you've hired and empowered to be successful.
You talk about this here, and Terry, let me not like keep you out. So if there's anything that Jay says, like feel free to jump in on it. What struck me with what you were saying was, I heard you say like, and then get out of their way. And the first time you
Mhm.
said it, like I was like, makes perfect sense, so on and so forth. And then this time around, when I heard you when you said it, like the thing that struck me was like, oh, like that's actually like being you have to be able to really like release power and control in a sense, like almost like to share it in a different way there. And as I like the word like kind of like surrender, but not like not fully in like the in a passive passivity, but like a surrender comes up there. And I'm wondering if you can talk about that there, because I feel like that's now I'm meeting you and you're like, yeah, this is just what we do. But I'm curious about like either the first time you really started to have to really let go, and how both of you like have approached like releasing or letting go, to allowing the larger vision to come to play. Either one of you want to take that on?
Yeah,
Yeah, go
I go
ahead.
back to my negotiating days. We would be obviously negotiating with somebody who's probably having the worst day of their life. I mean, if you're talking to me and your house is surrounded by the police, you're not having a good day. But we wouldn't start out with, an authoritarian kind of thing, like, I'm a police officer, or I'm a sergeant, or something like that. It would be, hi, I'm Terry. What's your name? So you want to connect with people where they are. You're not trying to, my job is to get you out safely. That's really what I want, or get the hostages out safely. And it's a curiosity, and it may be, a lot of times we're there. I don't know why we're there. I don't know what precipitated all this. So I want you to help me understand what's going on. And the important word there is understand. If you just murdered three people, I wasn't going to agree that what you did was right, but I wanted to understand that because understanding leads to trust, and trust leads to a point where hopefully I can get you out safely. So as Jay was saying, you want to set the tone and things like that, but you also kind of want to step back and give the other person an opportunity to say, "Hey, I've got some things going on here, whether it's business or, there are precipitating events that occurred that you don't know about." So, it's you want to be the boss, you want to be in charge, but at the same time, you need to be humble and step back and say, "Okay, I don't know everything. Maybe I need to listen more than I need to talk."
100% agree. First time I've ever been able to, at a certainly at a different level of stress, connect one of my staff meetings to a hostage situation. But it's exactly the same as you walk in a room and you want to connect with people and you want to understand who they are and why they're there and what they're about. But you want to get to the end result, which is, in your situation, Terry, is safety. And in my situation, it's some kind of business result. And the surrender occurs because you quickly realize that the people in the room know a heck of a lot more than I do. Because they are, I don't like to use war analogies, but they're in the trenches, right? They're playing the game. You're up in the stands watching it all. And sure, when you're going from 0 to 1, you're probably playing the game as well. But when you're going from 1 to 100 or 1 to 1 million or whatever that number might be, you got to get off the field. And so to do that is you really have to trust and acknowledge that the people that are playing that game know a heck of a lot more about what's going on than you do.
So outliers, like take this in right now, as you're coming in, like ask, like check in as we're having this conversation. Know that you're also a participant in this, and the way that this works best is if as we're talking, we're not just taking it as information, but we're actually looking to apply and see, like, okay, in what places are we showing up things. I just want to share something that y'all just gave me that I'm going to be taking out from here, which is a new distinction, which is and the distinction is understanding does not necessarily mean agreement.
Mhm.
Understand, like, and I feel like that, like, when I say this, I get goosebumps up the right side of my body. But I just think about like how many more conversations I can have, and how even just setting that in as a baseline of a parameter in a conversation, like, will open up the doors to just allow people to come in and be heard, be seen, and play with the safety and trust that's there. So thank you for
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah, if I may build on that, the most important part of that is to make sure that you're using the proper language when you begin the conversation.
Tell me
Because
more
if
about
you,
that.
yeah, because if you basically say, if you sit down and Terry and I are going to have a conversation, and Terry thinks that whatever I hear from him, I'm going to go act upon because he might be the subject matter expert. That's one thing. But if I say to Terry, Terry, I'm here to understand your point of view, but you have to appreciate I'm going to digest this and incorporate it into many other points of views that I'm collecting before I go act upon it. And in fact, what you share with me might not even get acted upon. At least you're framing the conversation initially. So Terry's hopefully still feels very comfortable sharing, but he also doesn't have an unexpected expectation or an irrational expectation that exactly whatever is said is going to be immediately acted upon.
Yeah, that's a great point. One of my very first job out of college was in the marketing department at the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain. And I was there kind of in their heyday, but I was also at the end of my career there. I was there when things were not going good, when fast food was kind of falling off. And so many other companies, McDonald's, Burger King, were laying people off. And the president of Wendy's said, "We're not going to do that. We're going to basically have a listening session." So the VPs basically got in a room with everybody, put up a whiteboard and said, "All right, help us to understand what's going on." So, going back to what you said, Jay, about the people in the trenches, these are the people that are dealing with the suppliers, the franchisees, the customers on a daily basis. We're not. So we need to listen to these people. So there was almost a listening kind of program that Wendy's developed of how do we survive this downturn in our business without laying off our staff. And it was just an entirely different way. And I was still a kid. I was like 22 years old, when this was going on. I didn't understand this, but now as an adult, when I've had more time and I'm older, it's like, yeah, that made a lot of sense. It wasn't the knee-jerk reaction of, oh, boom, let's just lay people off and that'll take care of the bottom line. It's no, let's go to the people that understand the business the best and try to apply what they have to say to save the business and make us more profitable.
So I'm enjoying where this conversation is going, and it's sparking up a couple different things inside of me. Um, Jay, you talked earlier about like your role now is about finding great people and then getting out of their way, right? So we look at the getting out of the way part. Now I want to kind of talk about the finding great people. Terry, you also talked about like your whole thing right now is all about relationships, and what I'm getting from both of you is that like y'all have really invested in the skills of cultivating and creating powerful relationships that lead to like transformations and results out for people. Right. And so I want to play a little bit with the find great people component of this here. There's I realize as inherited in some of the things you're saying about getting out of their way, it was like you're like, I'm hiring people who are more knowledgeable than me,
Hmm.
in various areas. I'm like, and so on and so forth. So I think that the place I like to think about like what's the outlier question related
Hmm.
to this. Like, so it's not like how do you find great people. Um, I think that the question that's come to me is really playing a little bit more on like the ego side of things, right?
Hmm.
Like I've met really great people who their cap is themselves. Like they haven't been able to hire someone that was better than them at it. So I think there's two sides. I said the ego, but let's just say like the self leadership part, right? One part of it that comes up is like, all right, just like your own ego, can I hire someone that's up there? And the other part of it, I think, is also like, would someone want to work for me? Like, if like who would actually know? Like, if I hired someone that was better than me, they saw what this thing really looked like, could they really do it? So I was wondering if y'all could speak to that right now, because I could imagine some outliers are just like hitting all these windows, trying to these walls, trying to like get around something where it's like actually the real inner part right now is being able to navigate this. Jay, I'm going to start off with you on this one. I'm curious, and then we'll come to you, Tucker.
Sure. In terms of hiring, especially people that, to your point, might be at a different level than you are, the key that I have found is just to make it as objective as possible. If you allow um, the tiniest little bit, a molecule of subjectivity into the process, you're going to fail because ego does get in the way. There's, all sorts of biases that occur within a matter of seconds of meeting folks. So we really have been very rigorous in every organization I've led to make the hiring process as objective as possible. And the way we do that is, pretty standard fare with scorecards and multiple people in an interview and ensuring that that job descriptions and accountabilities are well documented in advance, et cetera. And to be quite honest, I hope I can say these words on this. It's a pain in the ass. It's like a real pain in the ass. People hate it. They're like, I have a open seat and I need it filled now. And I'm like, well, guess what? It's probably going to be 30, 60, 90 days before we even get a candidate to meet because of all these other elements we need to address first. But by doing that, you eliminate, hey, is my ego going to inhibit me from hiring a great person? Is just to make it as objective as possible.
I hear that, and Tara, when it comes to you in a bit, but like when I hear that, I'm like, one of the other benefits of that is that it requires you to become so clear. Like when you said it, I was like, this sounds nice, but the actual implementation of this has got to be work. And like what I'm hearing here is like to go through that process of being like what exactly do we need? What is the
Hmm.
difference between someone who's showing up at a level one versus someone who's showing up at a level five in this
Hmm.
particular competency and so on and so forth? Like that's robust.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we build time into our planning. We go through a quarterly planning cycle at SideStream, and we talk about what kind of deliverables we have, and there's always client deliverables like we got to get this done, we got to get this done, and that's features and foundation building, et cetera. But then we'll be like, okay, we need X percent of time to work on hiring. And so it's baked into the planning. It's not an afterthought, and it's not, well, find time. It is, part of the time that we consume for that quarter.
Love it. Love it. Terry, what's coming up for you on this one?
Yeah, I think what Jay's talking about is the culture that he's developed, within his organization. And again, I've had a lot of jobs in my life, and one of the jobs I had was I was a high school basketball coach. And, when you look to pick captains, it's usually, well, the seniors, those are the people that are going to be the captains. And I used to do it differently. I used to give every member on the team a 10-question questionnaire. And it was basically things like, if you had a problem, who on the team would you go to? And there were three different blanks, and you would list them out. Who on the team, has the best interest of the team involved, one, two, three. And then I would take the scores, I would add them up, 3 points for the first, 2 points for the second, 1 point for the third. And I would add those up. And a lot of times I would come up with maybe two juniors that the rest of the team looked at and said, these are the people who I want in a leadership role on the team, not the coaches, but from a teammate point of view. Or maybe it was a sophomore and a senior, or a sophomore and a junior. And that's how I would pick my captains because I just didn't want, well, you're a senior, you get to be a captain. You may be a senior and a terrible leader. I don't want you in that role because I'm trying to develop a culture within my team, just like Jay's trying to develop a culture within his organization. And he bakes these things into it to make sure that he gets the right people in the right spots.
Love it.
I appreciate it. This has been really helpful just to dive into how y'all are thinking about it. I want to go and talk about like some of what you're doing right now. And I think I'm going to start with Jay on this one here. Terry, I have a feeling there's an earworm that Terry brought this in, but I'm curious about like why you're a serial entrepreneur of all the things it's going to go for both of you, but like out of all the things you can be doing with your time, your limited time, like why are you choosing to do this now? Like why is like what you're doing? Why is that so important to you? Thank you, Terry, for
You
bringing
mean you mean there's
that.
another option?
Yeah, right, all right.
No, I'm teasing. I'm
Yeah.
teasing only because, it's just I feel it's in your blood. Like you just get a taste of it. I remember going, gosh, I'm going to date myself, but going back to graduating from B school, it was 1997. The internet was frothy at that point in time for those listeners that can remember that. I went to business school in the Midwest, as I already said, University of Chicago. And everyone from University of Chicago in 97, when I say everyone, 98% wanted to do management consulting or banking. Those were the two options. And I heard about this internet thing and I said, gosh, that's curious. That sounds like a little bit of a gold rush. Maybe I want to, go learn more about that. So I went to the career services, and apologies if the career services is listening to this. They didn't really know how to help me. They said, go figure it out. And so finding a job was as much of an entrepreneurial, activity as actually starting a business. And from that point forward, it just kind of whetted my appetite, and I rode that wave and been up and down with every kind of, industry cycle that you can imagine. But once you get it in your blood, it's hard to go back. I can't imagine, working for the large organization at this point in time. Just, there's Daniel Pink's is a great author if you've ever read any of his stuff. And he has a book out there called Drive. And he talks about like three intrinsic motivators. And one of them is around, your mission, like what do you feel? And one is really about, like mastery of a particular skill. The third one is autonomy, and that's really my intrinsic motivator is like I like to have autonomy, and therefore starting, growing, being leader of different businesses really fuels that for me.
Love that here. Now, so Jay just brought in these three different areas. Like, just check in with yourself real quick here around which one of those three might be driving you right now. Terry, how about you? Why this out of all the things? You know.
Yeah, exactly. And excuse me, I'm trying to balance my health situation with wanting to be purposeful in life. And I wrote two books. And, when I was in high school, I've been, Jay, I grew up on the South Side of Chicago. I went to Marist High School.
Sure.
And I mean, if you would have told me then I would have written books, I would have been like, you're nuts. I'm a basketball player. That's what I do. That's all I know. But you want to be purposeful. And these books are about things that I've learned in my life, in my journey. And I've also been a guest on probably 800 or 900 podcasts all around the world. Never wanted to do that, never started to do it. But I remember, I started a speaking business and then COVID hit and everything shut down. And a friend of mine reached out and said, would you like to be a guest on my podcast? And I said, sure. What's a podcast? I had no idea what a podcast was. And he explained it to me. And I said, well, okay, I'll give it a try. And I was horrible. I was terrible. I provided no value at all to the audience, but I liked it. And I thought, the first time I drove a car, I wasn't any good at it. The first time I did algebra, I wasn't any good at it. First time I cooked a meal, I burned the water. You can't burn the water, just so you know, and things like that. And it was, how do you get good at it? And somebody once told me, never make a point without telling a story, and never tell a story without making a point. And so if I gave you four things, you might remember one of them. But if I gave you four things and told you a story about them, then you might remember them more. So then I became obsessed with stories, how to get better stories, how to make points with stories and things like that. And I listen to every podcast I've been on. I try to figure out if I can have a better story, a more concise story, or how many times they say or and things like that. So it's like what Jay does in his, but you want to be the best at what you do. And it's the little things that really that get you to that point, and along with hiring, great people that are usually smarter than you.
So as we're playing this game here, I'm thinking about the various outliers that are listening to this, and right now we're in a place where things feel good, right? We've been able to cover some of all right, what are your philosophies toward things? Let's go back and look at some of the things that keep working out. Let's get into the place where where it gets muddy, right? So there's two places that I like to look at. One of them goes to challenges that you've had, like places where you failed. And the other part of it here, and I'm not sure if I want to lean into this because it's the first time it's coming in, but it's really around risk, where it's like where there's certain things that feel like, okay, this makes sense and let's go with it, but there's another things that feel more risky. And honestly, I'm gonna actually defer to you two on this one here. I think I know the direction that I want to go, which is to let's leave the world of sunshine and flowers and get into the parts where when people are going through the doldrums of it all, how do you navigate that? And if you can make it real for us, share a story of either something that you're either going through or that you've been through and your process of navigating it. I think that will help give us a little bit of context for that. Either of you, Jay, I see you nodding pretty heavily. So why don't we start with you?
Happy to talk about either one. I'll talk about the risk one because as CEO of an organization, risk often falls into your lap. It could be a CFO, but it's generally at the CEO level. My approach to risk is, boy, is it scary, right? Let's acknowledge that. But documenting the rationale behind the choice and understanding the consequences. And let me give you an example of this. Right now, AI is all the rage, right? Everyone, AI, 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 everywhere you go. Well, with an organization, there's a tremendous amount of upside with AI, and there's a tremendous amount of risk with AI. It's very easy for a data scientist on my team, in this hypothetical, I don't want to put myself at risk here, but in this hypothetical, it's very easy for a data scientist on my team to upload confidential information from a client into some kind of AI tool to try to facilitate or simplify their analysis. Boy, that certainly is risky. And it could be even contractually, wrong, depending on what kind of contract we have with our client. So going back to my first point of how do I deal with risk is documentation and acknowledgement and consequences is we've been spending the last 90 days with a Tiger team, a committee, coming up with what our AI policy would be. That is both liberating, but also acknowledging those risks and talking about, the different scenarios and what we feel comfortable with and what we don't feel comfortable with. Are these hard red lines that you can cross or you can't cross? Absolutely not. But it is something that someone can review, and we're not talking about a 20-page policy. We're talking about a 3-page policy, 4 pages at most, that someone can review and say, I now understand what my constraints are. And this is, I can go find green pastures with AI without feeling intimidated, because I feel like I've stepped afoul. So putting that on paper, as a manager of risk, makes me feel a lot more comfortable about it.
I love this here. Like Jay, one of the things that I think I'm getting from you, and this is I feel like you're really good at creating clarity through like distinctions and discernment. Like, so now we're talking about putting like taking the risk of AI and being able to give a clear policy, three pages and so forth, right? Before we were talking about when it comes to the role, it's like, all right, what is the scorecard? There. And I'm seeing that like you're really good at being able to tease out like what are the guidelines and how can we make that clear enough that we can all navigate together? How true does that feel when I say that?
It feels very true because that's really what my role is basically ensure that people understand what we're asking of them. And as I already mentioned, get out of their way to allow them to do it and providing that clarity. I mean, we've all been there, right? We've all had bosses before where you're like, what am I supposed to be doing? Am I doing the right thing? Does this feel right? I don't get the right feedback. I don't know what the KPIs, the key performance indicators are, or the OKRs, the objectives and key results. Like, I don't understand my role here. And therefore, that confusion just paralyzes. But if you can provide that clarity, then people are going to basically meet those expectations.
Yeah, feels right. And what I don't want you to know is like it's making me think about myself and my team right now. I'm like, oh, all right, what is it like? Am I doing the work of sitting down and discerning this here? My team is probably going to be very grateful for you in this conversation, Jay, both now and in the future. Thanks.
My pleasure.
Terry, how about you?
Yeah, talking about risk, I remember seeing a survey that said 83% of Americans feel they have a book inside them, and yet less than 1% of those people will ever write that book.
Mm.
And I'm sure there's a lot of reasons, but I think one of the biggest reasons is fear. Do I have anything to say? There's the old saying about, some people talk because they have something to say, others because they have to say something. And when I sat down to write my first book, it was like, I don't know how to write a book. I don't know anything about this. But I came up with two rules. I said, number one, I'll write one page, a minimum of one page every day Monday through Saturday. I'll take Sunday off. And I won't edit anything until I feel I have a first draft. So you sit down, and you start to write, and you're like, okay, that's garbage, that's garbage, that's garbage. But then you write something good, and then it's garbage, and then it's something good, and then it's garbage. And at the end, you've got this document that you start to pull out all, it's like garbage, garbage, garbage. No, something good. And eventually you have something that you're proud of. And I think fear is one of the biggest reasons that holds people back. I think most people think with their fears and their insecurities instead of thinking with their minds. So if there's something you want to do, something you're afraid to do, go ahead and do it. Because the worst thing that can happen to you is that you learn, you mess up, but you learn something. And if you learn something, it's been a good day, whether you mess up or not. So, that risk part, if you're scared, do it. If you're not scared, maybe you need to get to a point where you are scared so that it motivates you to do something.
Oh, I love that element of getting to that point where you are scared. I think that I oftentimes will talk about like impossible goals that people are taking on, or like the things that they're doing that are giving them sweaty palms. And I for me, I found that if that's not there, then it's really hard for me to grow. And like, if I don't have that sink in feeling, nowadays that's become a bit of my compass. So I'm like, oh no, like then this might be the path that we go in. Uh, you two have been absolutely phenomenal here. We're going to start wrapping up the conversation. The I want to do this year. I think we have space for three questions. All right, the two, most of them are quick, but the space here is we're going to call this the outside and insights portion of the show. All right. So outsights to me are things that you want any outlier who's listening to this, any leader that's like I have a vision. There's something I'm moving toward here. What would you want them to know? All right. So if you can share something that you want to share with them as a takeaway for them, go ahead and do that. That's an outside. And if you can also then let them know, like, all right, how can they go deeper down the journey with you? What's the best way for them to continue on with you? That'd be wonderful. All right. So we're gonna do outsides and deeper down the journey. Terry, let's start with you on this one. And we'll come to you, Jay.
I guess I would say most people don't have it figured out. There's this tendency that I want to have everything in place, and until I get everything in place, I don't want to start. I would say start where you are. I heard a great story. Jesse Itzler talks about his wife, Sarah Blakely. Sarah Blakely started the women's undergarment company called Spanx. And he said she started it with one prototype and $5,000. She'd been a door-to-door fax salesperson. We don't even use faxes for the most part anymore. But his point was if she would have waited until she understood distribution and marketing and finance and everything. He said, I guarantee you somebody else would have come up with the idea and taken off with it. So his point was wherever you are, just start and then figure it out as you go along. If you need to add somebody who understands production or finance or marketing, then add those people as you go. And I think that's a big thing. That's again something that holds people back. I don't have it all figured out. Guess what? Most people don't. Most people don't have it all figured out. I didn't know what I wanted to major in college. My dad told me to major in business. Okay, Dad, I'll do that. So don't think you've got to have it all figured out. Just start where you are and then move forward.
I love it, Terry. And like it's so cool how like you can hear the message and you know it, but then like sometimes you just need to hear it at the right time. I'm thinking right for now, this is hitting me again. I'm like, oh, where have I like forgotten that? Where am I putting in too much like structure when it's like actually go in and like and build it as it goes along. So thank you. Terry, what's the best way for people to go deeper down the journey with you?
Just my website, motivationalcheck.com, will get you to me.
Perfect. 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 All right, Jay, let's come to you. What's an outside you have for any outlier, and then the best way for us to go deeper down with you?
Yeah, it builds on a lot on what just Terry just said, which is I believe everyone should have a mentor, like hard stop, right? You can call it a coach, you can call it an advisor, you can call it whatever you want, but everyone needs someone they can go to talk to about life or business or a relationship or whatever else it might be. And you'll be surprised that kind of going back to our conversation at the very beginning about talking to a stranger on a bus, people would be honored to be your mentor. So ask that professor, ask your clergy, ask, your great uncle who you've always wanted to, learn from, whomever it might be, ask the question, hey, you know what? You probably have some life experiences I can learn from. Do you mind if we meet on a regular basis and have that conversation? And then treat it like a real conversation. This is not something that you pick up the phone every 6 months and check in on, like, hey, I'd like to talk every month for an hour over a cup of coffee. I'll give you the agenda a week in advance or 3 days in advance or whatever. And I have some questions I want to ask you. And I'm not asking you for answers. I would just love your opinion, kind of shared experience on this. And so I have always had mentors. I'm always looking for more mentors. And it's amazing, learning from other people. It just really accelerates what you're trying to do in life.
Mm, mm, mm. Thank you for that, Jay. It's
You're
just y'all are
welcome.
just giving me some good nuggets here. I'm just like, oh, it's all readily available. Outliers, like there's a simplicity to this that I think that I don't want us to lose here. Jay, for any outliers who wants to go deeper down the journey with you, what's the best way for them to do it?
Yeah, probably on LinkedIn. So it's just first name, last name. So slash Jay Rudman, easy to find.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. All right, so we're going to end here. The last question I ask everyone here is that whenever I bring people together and have a conversation, like for me, the purpose is to open up the possibility of it being a life-changing conversation. Now, I don't need to know it, like it doesn't change your life in the moment, but I love to leave that possibility open. And so the question I have here, we talked about outsights before. This one's about an insight. Let's put outliers to the side. They're good here. In what ways have you grown? What's something that you're taking away from this conversation as a result of being here? And if you're like, oh, you know what, it was a fine conversation, didn't really grow anywhere, you can say that. Like, don't feel like you got to make up something there on it. But it'd be really great to just like end this experience with that. Jay, we'll start with you. Then we'll go to Terry, and we'll bring it all.
Yeah, no, Terry, thank you for all that you shared. I feel like I'm one of those 83% that has a book in me that I want to do one day. And, one day probably had to be yesterday. So maybe I'll actually start that process. So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Lovely. And Terry.
Yeah, it's just fun to listen to Jay talk about business. I've been so isolated, with cancer for 14 years and kind of been in my own world. I forgot what it was like to go to work every day, at the office and things like that and be around people and, talk about the basketball game last night or just have going back to those relationships and things like that. So, yeah, thank you, Jay, for, opening up about how you do what you do and things like that. It just kind of brought me back a number of years ago.
You're welcome.
Well, I am grateful for each of you. Thank you so much for bringing your time, your experience, your expertise to this conversation. And thanks for being like forthcoming here. It was like really one of the highlights of my day and outliers. Like, let's honor this conversation by applying something here from this. Right? That's it. And sharing this out with someone else in your world, just one person that you feel would really benefit from having this conversation. Like, you can always go and share it far beyond it, but I think that there's something called the one person, one conversation at a time initiative. And my hope is that years into the future, this is still reaching the next right person and starting off something up from there. Outliers, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Until the next time we all talk, be you on purpose. Journey on.